Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about insulin. It is the hormone that makes you fat, that stores fat, stores calories. So it is definitely an important one if weight loss is important to you. And we're going to talk today about what it is, how it's raised, how the dietary advice that we've been given up to this point keeps it high, and the new approach that keeps it low, right, so you can get weight off. So you want to tackle it? What is where are we going with insulin?
Well, so insulin, we've all heard of insulin. Insulin is a hormone protein. It's made of 51 amino acids, so it's quite large. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that you can't take insulin by mouth, because it gets broken down in the stomach, it's just not going to pass through.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It was discovered in, I think, the early 20s. There was a Nobel Prize, Banting and Best, mm-hmm, back then. And diabetics, which they had known about diabetes for a long time before that, finally then I think 20 years later, maybe in the 40s or 50s, they started being able to produce insulin.
Are you talking about type 1 diabetic?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So there's a difference there.
There is a difference, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Then I think that in the late 50s, Frederick Sanger figured out the structure of it all. I mean, it's a pretty complex thing. But it is, it's one of our main hormones. It's the most anabolic hormone we have, which means that it builds things, it stores, it does not tear them down. Mm-hmm. So in the case of body fat, that's not a great thing.
Right.
But it is still needed to shuttle amino acids and different things into cells as well. So
right,
we do have a need for it.
Right. So yes, it's the fat storing hormone, but it doesn't mean that we want to be without it. Right. That's actually the problem of type 1 diabetics. And one of the hallmarks of type 1 diabetes is that they absolutely cannot gain weight.
Right. They waste away.
They waste away. And before they found that insulin that could be injected to help type 1 diabetics, it was a fatal disease with no.
And once it was diagnosed and once it was found, it didn't take very long. Right. And they could eat 10,000 calories a day and they would still not gain weight. They would just waste away. It would eat their body away. Their
right,
muscle, their fat, everything.
Right.
Terrible disease.
Right. And in fact, kind of an interesting side of that, interesting and kind of tragic in the same way. There's a condition among type 1 diabetics called diabulimia. So diabetic bulimia. They put the term together because if a type 1 diabetic wants to lose weight, they will inject insulin into their body. So because more insulin, more fat storage.
Yeah. Everybody, diabetics have known for a long time that insulin is the fat storing hormone. Insulin will make you fat. So let's talk about diabetes, because that's typically when we think of insulin, that's what we think of as diabetes. And we talked about type 1. And type 1 is where it's an autoimmune disease where the cells in your pancreas that produce insulin are destroyed. So you don't have any insulin in your body at all. And you have to have some. Type 2 diabetes is almost the opposite.
Right.
It is hyperinsulinemia or too much insulin and the development of insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. And before we get too far, I do want to throw out a little shout out. So diabetes mellitus, right, is what this is called. Diabetes means, I think, to pass through, because they noticed people were urinating a lot with diabetes. In 1675, I've got to give this guy a shout out. He probably never got a shout out on YouTube before. Name was Thomas Willis. He added the word mellitus to it, okay, because he noticed that the urine tasted sweet, like honey, and that's what mellitus means. So okay, I think for that contribution, Thomas, you went above and beyond, and we're going to give you the thumbs up on that one. So anyway, so that's type 1. So type 2 is a disease of insulin resistance. And we've talked about insulin resistance so many times on our channel. Your cells become very resistant to the circulating insulin, which is supposed to open up the doors and allow things to go in the cells, whether it's glucose or whatever. But typically what happens, right, why we get fat, is that the insulin keeps pushing more and more glucose in, and once it reaches the limit, which your body really can't store too much of that, it starts overflowing, and then it gets shuffled over to the fat storage, and you just get fatter and fatter and fatter.
Right.
So that's how that works. The insulin is the storage hormone.
Right, so it goes into our endless closets, which are our fat cells. So insulin will shuttle sugar, blood glucose, into smaller storage places like our muscles, and some is stored in the liver.
Right.
But there's not a lot of storage there. So there is a place in our bodies that has endless storage, and that is our fat cells, and that's how insulin perpetuates and keeps us storing fat. So the logic of, once you understand insulin, the logic becomes then you should work to eat in a way that will keep insulin low.
Right.
However, what we've been taught over the past 60 some years is the complete opposite of that. So if we think about the dietary advice of the past 60 years, we have been taught to eat small, frequent meals, and the food pyramid, which is pretty much the iconic symbol of diet during the 1900s, late 1900s,
Yeah.
Showed us that we had to eat, what was it, like six to 10
Something
servings of carbs
Quite a bit, yeah.
a day. So carbohydrates are the foods that break down into sugar, and they are the ones that will spike insulin. So if we're eating 6 to 10 servings a day, how many hours are we awake? Like 16?
17, yeah.
So that's, in
Like every
essence,
couple
we are
hours.
constantly fueling our bodies, or just eating 6 small meals a day. We are constantly fueling our insulin. We're making it go up and stay elevated. So we are constantly in a fat storing mode.
Right. And we should say too that insulin, when it's up, you're in a fat storing mode. You cannot burn your body fat while insulin is high. It shuts that door. It opens one door, but it shuts the other one. So there's no way that you can burn fat when your insulin stays high. And 6 small meals a day, keeping insulin high. It's no wonder that we've gotten this obesity epidemic, in the last 30, 40 years.
Right. And it also explains the shift that we have seen
Right.
just really very recently, certainly within this past decade,
Yep.
where we're going to a high-fat, low-carb diet and also intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
So those two things, if we think about the mechanism of why those two things work, it is because a low-carb diet is not going to be putting sugar into your system. Therefore, insulin does not need to be produced in as much excess.
Right.
Intermittent fasting, the same thing. Intermittent fasting meaning that you are eating all of your calories within a smaller eating window. Well, that gives you all of those hours to fast. Say you're going to fast for 16 hours and eat within an 8-hour window. That fasting period, there is no need for insulin to be raised up. Your fat storage door closes and your fat burning door opens up.
Yep. And that's exactly what you want. We talk about the ketogenic diet. We talked about, that really is, what this is all about, is low carbohydrate, keep your insulin low. The high-fat diet gives you the nutrients that you need to, sustain and do the things you do during the day. And we should say that, you do need an adequate source of, protein or amount of protein,
Right.
but you don't want to get too much, because protein can have an insulin-stimulating effect as well. Mm-hmm. So there is, this is not a high-protein diet by
Right.
any means. So.
Right.
High fat, low carb, moderate protein, that's where you want to keep it.
It is.
Yeah.
All right, so hope that was helpful.
Hope so.
And hey, thanks so much for watching. If it was helpful, please subscribe to our channel, and we will be back real soon with another video. Help you reach your goals.
Yep.
Thanks.
See ya.
1600s.
The 1600s,
Good,
yeah.
good to live in the 21st century.
Yeah. I would not want to be doing